In this video, we're going to cover dosage calculations. In particular, we're going to work with the dosage formula. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about grains and their relationship to milligrams. Now, what grains are, it's a measurement system that comes from the Apothecary system. It's an older, obsolete system, but you will sometimes run across it. Now, grains are written a little differently. First, the abbreviation is GR. Be careful not to use G because G stands for grams. The abbreviation is GR, and you're going to see some Roman numerals and fractions. Recall that when you work with metric uses whole numbers and decimals. So decimals are typically used in metric system. In the apothecary system, you work with Roman numerals and fractions. Let's look at some of the basic rules of how apothecary measurements are written. If you have a fraction of 1/2, it can be rewritten as an SS. Remember, that's our Roman numeral symbol for 1/2. So if you would see grains ISS, that actually means 1.5 grains. If you see Roman numerals, the Roman numerals, typically if the amount is less than or equal to 10, they're going to use a Roman numeral. So grains X would actually mean 10 grains. And then you might notice it seems like everything is written backwards with the number listed second. That is another rule or basic rule that's followed with apothecary. Instead of writing the number before the unit, they write the unit first and then the number. So for example, instead of writing 7.5 grains or 7.5 grains, it'd be written grains with a VIISS. Or this example here, where it has grains IVSS, well, the IV means 4 and SS means 1/2, so that, translates into 4.5 grains. Now let's do some conversions. There are two acceptable versions of the conversion between grains and milligrams. The more common one and the one that we're going to focus on is this 1 grain is equal to 60 milligrams. But there are two acceptable ones, 60 and 65. The reason why there's a little bit of variation is apothecary is not an exact measurement system. So for example, if you have a teaspoon at home, not all your teaspoons are exactly the same size. There's a little bit of variation. So back when they did this, there was a little bit of variation. Now, for our purposes, we're going to use this one, 1 grain is equal to 60 milligrams. And these are just some reminders. When you're working with the metric system like milliliters, milligrams, use decimals. But when you're working with grains, you're going to be working with either fractions or sometimes with Roman numerals. So let's start with this one. Recall we're going to use this fact that we have 60 milligrams is equal to 1 grain. And I'm just going to go ahead and write it how you would see it in apothecary. 1 grain would be grain I, because I is the Roman numeral for 1. So we'll start out with the given, 48 milligrams over 1. We need milligrams to cancel, so we know that unit goes on the bottom. We need grains is what we want to end up with, so that unit goes on the top. Now, looking at my conversion, there are 60 milligrams in 1 grain. And remember, I is still the Roman numeral for 1. And let's do the math. 48 times 1 is 48, and 1 times 60 is 60. Now, I notice that my answer is in grains. So let's see how we would write it properly. Grains wants fractions, so I'm going to reduce this fraction. Both of these numbers are divisible by 12. So this would reduce to 4/5. I'm going to put the number second, and I'm going to put the unit first. So grain 4/5 would be the proper way that is written. Now, if you would happen to divide these out and write it as a decimal, for example, 48 divided by 60 comes out to be 0.8, and then put the unit there, I will understand what you're talking about, but the proper way to write it is with the fraction and the number listed after the unit. Now let's look at this one. Grain 1/6 equals so many milligrams. Well, again, I know that the true fact is 60 milligrams is 1 grain. So I'm going to go ahead and write, I've got grain 1/6 over 1 times. This time I need the grains to cancel, so grains go on the bottom and the milligrams go on the top. And I look up here, 60 milligrams is 1 grain, so my grains would cancel, and I know my answer is going to be in milligrams. Now let's do the math a little slowly. We got 1/6 times 60, and on the bottom we just have 1 times 1, because even though it's a Roman numeral, it's still just a 1. So I only have to work 1/6 times 60. Well, 1/6 times 60 would look something like that, and that would be 60 over 6, which equals 10. Now looking back at my unit is milligrams, so my answer would be 10 milligrams. Now let's look at this one. We're changing milligrams into grains. Again, you recall your conversion. There's 60 milligrams in 1 grain. I'll start out with a given, 0.4 milligrams. Milligrams is a metric unit. That's why they have a decimal written there. I want the milligrams to cancel, and I want to change it to grains. So grains goes on top. There is 1 grain per every 60 milligrams. Now, if I do my math, 0.4 times 1 is 0.4. 1 times 60 is 60. Now, I need to fix this because this is not the proper way to write a fraction. First thing you want to do is compensate for the decimal point. Move both of these over by 1. So this would be equivalent to 4 over 600. Now I can reduce it. Both of these are divisible by 4. If I divide 4 into 4, I get 1. If I divide 4 into 600, I get 150. So the number part is 1 over 150. Now, to write it properly, we'll write the unit first, which is a grain, and I know that because the milligrams canceled, and then I'll write the fraction after 1 1/150th. Now, in these problems, you may need to do more than one step. Remember that the conversion we know is milligrams to grains, and this one is grams to grains. So before I start, I have to change this into milligrams. Now I'll go ahead and do this up here at the top, 0.015 grams over 1. And I know that for every gram, there is 1,000 milligrams. That's from back where we did work with metrics. So we would have 15 milligrams. Let me fix that, milligrams. Now, if you can do it by just moving the decimal point, that's fine, but I'm just going to go show how the process is to get the 15 milligrams. So my problem is to convert, I need to convert 50 milligrams into grains. And I know from the previous slides that there are 60 milligrams in 1 grain. So the milligrams cancel, and we'll do the math. 15 times 1 is 15. 1 times 60 is 60, and I'm going to need to reduce that. Now, this is a little bit bigger number, so you might start by dividing both by 5. If I divide them both by 5, that's going to give me 3 over, 12. And now both of these are divisible by 3, so that would reduce to 1 over 4. So when I write my answer, I need to have 1/4 grains, and 1/4 grains written properly would be grain with a 1/4 followed afterwards. Now let's look at this one. Notice this time they write Roman numerals, so they got ISS, and remember what that means. That means 1.5. So we're going to take our grain ISS over 1, and we're going to convert it into milligrams. Now, there are 60 milligrams per grain. I need grains to cancel, so grains go on the bottom, milligrams go on the top. Again, there's 60 milligram per 1 grain. I'll put my grain I. And if it helps you, just remember that's 1.5. Well, 1.5 times 60 makes 90. And of course, 1 times 1 makes 1. So we're going to end up having 90, and the unit would be milligrams. Now, this problem, notice, wants the answer in grams. So now I'm going to have to do that extra conversion step at the end. 90 milligrams over 1. And again, there are 1,000 milligrams in 1 gram. So I end up having 90 over 1,000. And when you write the decimal, 0.09. And again, this one's written with decimals because this is a metric unit.